Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're going to be taking a look at this review copy I was sent of The Nightmares Underneath by Johnstone Metzger. I've reviewed a previous book by the same author, The Metamorphica. I'll put a link to it right up here where you can check that out for yourself, which is an extremely comprehensive toolkit and a set of random tables for generating mutations and abilities for creatures. So this book is a full-on OSR rulebook for a setting created by the author. And the general gist here is that it is in a fantasy Arabia-like setting where you are dungeon delving, except the dungeons are nightmare incursions from the world of nightmares. This book is very thorough and complete. It is a good 400 plus pages long, includes a huge amount of material. So I'm only going to be able to cover the basics here. But let's get into it. The first thing that I would like to point out is that the illustrations and the art in general is really, really good. It has a very distinct style. From what I can tell, the art is done in a collage style where bits of public domain art and pieces of different graphics and so on are all mashed together into these unique illustrations that are just really great and are very distinct. They look different than what I typically see from OSR artists, so I really like that. We have a number of direct inspirations over here, other OSR books. We have these great little portraits before each of the chapters that really get across what I mean by the art style involved here. So we start off with a general overview of role-playing games and what they are, using characters from other games, and so on. This being an OSR game, there are some tweaks between this and other rule sets, but as with most stuff, it's very broadly cross-compatible with other OSR books. Taking a character and putting it in here and vice versa is quite simple to do. Some of the stats are a little bit different, but it's quite painless. The beginning of the book starts off with a section on the setting. It's not very long. It covers the basics of the Kingdom of Dreams, or the Kingdoms of Dreams, where the main conflict is between law and chaos. The kingdoms representing law, of course, and nightmares representing chaos. It's not very thoroughly fleshed out. You would probably have to add a little bit more details if you wanted to really make this world more detailed, but it covers the basics. It has a number of noble families you can use and names that are typical in the different areas. So next is on the threat of chaos. Again, great little illustrations. They really bring across the sense of this, dangerous old tome, which is rare in a lot of RPGs, I think. This book captures that very well. In this book, you're going to be playing adventurers. What really sets you apart is that these nightmare incursions, these weird dungeons that are leaking up from beneath the earth, drive most mortal men mad to even be near one. However, you're one of the rare few for whom this just doesn't happen. You're mostly unaffected by these nightmare incursions, which means that you're going to loot them for treasure. Makes sense. In general, I really like the whole concept of why dungeons exist in this book. They're more psychological than physical, and I'll get a little bit more into detail as we get into that section of the book. But it's a great excuse for just populating the world with horrible, nightmarish locations to explore. It just fits really well. We have basic resolution rules. Now, one thing I've seen other reviewers point out about this book as well is that it has a lot of different resolution rules. So, for example, you could resolve things with chance, where you just roll a d6 or roll a percentile dice. You can use contest resolution, where you roll 2d6 plus the modifiers from your stats, similar to standard D&D. You have rules for dealing damage, and you have outcome resolution, where it's 2d6 plus modifiers and consult a table. This is basically powered by the apocalypse resolution, where 6 or less is very poor, 7 through 9 is mixed, and 10 or higher is good, or 12 is being like a critically good. And you can also have task resolution, where you're rolling underneath your attributes. So it's a little strange that there are so many different resolution systems involved here. However, they are fairly set apart for different types of actions. And it's really not that big of a deal, since it's very easy to just use the ones that you would like to use. That's fairly common throughout a lot of OSR books, where having like a very unified model of how everything is done is usually not, it's not a big premium placed on that really. Half the time when you're ruling what's going to happen in a situation, you need to make up one of these little rules for yourself. And this covers basically everything that you're going to need. You have advantage and disadvantage. Works basically like in 5th edition D&D. Saves are mostly done by rolling under your stats. And if it's a very difficult save, you're rolling under half of one of your stats. I actually like the skill system here quite a bit. It's very simple. It's very binary. Either you have a skill or you don't. And if an object or a task that you're trying to do requires a skill, and you have that skill and the proper tools, then you're just rolling under your stats as usual. However, if you're missing the right equipment, or if you're missing the right skill, but if you have the equipment, then you're rolling under half of your stat. And if you don't have either of those things, you're not skilled or the right tools, you simply can't do the task at all. This is very clear and it's very binary almost. Either you have the right materials to do this or you don't. Either you're skilled or you're not. In some cases, what you're doing is you're comparing against the dungeon level if you're in a dungeon incursion, where the deeper the level is, then it's going to get harder and harder for you to use your skills. Another great illustration here. Getting into the different types of characters that you can play. Here's your 6 stats, very similar to D&D stats. A couple things were changed. Ferocity is the replacement for strength. Health is the replacement for constitution, and so on. The player objectives are also very nice and clear. To portray first thing you do is to portray your character's personality as much or as little as you want. I really like that line. Different people have different play styles. Some people really get into character. Some people have a more standoffish approach to role-playing their character. And all of that is fine. Your main second objective is to explore dungeons made of nightmare and to survive these forays as long as possible until your character dies or until you decide that they should retire. You can always make a new character. And 3, to work together with the other players to portray a cohesive group of characters. So work together as a party, explore some dungeons, try not to die, and play your character if you want to. It's that kind of relaxed attitude that I enjoy. It's similar to how my games work. You have your modifiers, typical for D&D. They look more like what you would see for BX D&D than 5th edition. And you have your classes, which are here called professions. Assassins, bards, champions, cultists, fighters, scholars, thieves, and wizards. Basically covers all of your standard fantasy tropes, everything that you're going to need. If you're a fighting type character, like an assassin, then you're going to add your level to your attack rolls. Otherwise, you're not. So fighters are good at fighting. Non-fighters are not good at fighting. It's very clear cut. There's a great attention paid to page layout throughout this whole book. For example, each class is exactly on one page, or in some cases they're on 2 pages. But there isn't a lot of page flipping or bleed from one page to another. Everything is kept very clear and concise. You have your champions, which have different abilities depending on their alignment. So alignment does have some mechanical effects here. Cultists, which are a little bit like clerics. You can abjure things. Fighters, one thing I noticed about fighters is that just like all fighting characters, you add your level to your attack rolls. But when you attack an enemy, if your attack roll misses, you still inflict damage. And if it hits, then you just deal double damage. So if you're a fighter, you're auto-hitting basically every time you attack something. That makes fighters really good at fighting. It's a little bit like Into the Odd, how there's just auto damage. If you're a fighter and you run into a fight, you'll just start dealing out damage left and right. I think that's a great way to make fighters feel more thematic and to help balance them against, some spellcasters, which can get quite powerful over time. You have thieves, and like fighters, thieves have a very distinct niche. Thieves are good at finding things. If you're in a dungeon and you are working carefully and slowly, you're just going to find everything that's hidden, basically. Whereas other characters are going to roll and it might not be as effective for them. So if you like to explore dungeons and find the cool stuff, you want to be a thief. You got a wizard, and you have all of your basic stats typical for D&D. You have your hit dice, and hit dice also determine is the type of die that you roll for damage. So it's not based on weapon, it's based on your hit dice. You can roll your disposition, that's like your hit points, which get re-rolled fairly frequently. So depending on how you woke up that morning, your hit points might be a little bit higher or lower because you're going to be re-rolling your hit dice. Schools of magic, We have a good 10 schools of magic here, each of which has a variety of spells. And there is a supplement release for this book that has a huge number of extra spells. I'll give you a little preview of that later on. Alignment, money, and equipment. And finish up some finishing details here. Some details on equipment. Stuff you would see pretty typically in a D&D book. You get your shopping lists, the types of tools that you would need, and people that you can hire. You also have some really great starting packages. So this speeds up a lot of the busy work at the very beginning of the game when making a character. You can just roll on the correct table, and it tells you what you start off with. You can get up and running fast. More books should have that. We have our advancement system, where it shows you how experience works. Your attributes slowly gain over time. So in order to increase the level, you have to gain experience points, and you gain them mostly by recovering treasure and valuables from dungeons made of nightmare. It is a treasure for XP system, which rewards exploration. Carousing in the Kingdom of Dreams. So this has a lot of great little rules for dealing with lots of different situations that typically come up in D&D-like games. Similar to the way that the Metamorphica, which I reviewed previously, is like a toolkit for designing monsters, this whole book, in some sense, is like a rules toolkit, in that it gives you these little modular rules for resolving different types of situations that you can easily yank out of this book and plug into another book that you might enjoy. So, for example, rules for living in style. The vast majority of these little modular rules use the Powered by the Apocalypse system, where you're trying to roll 10 plus, and a 7 through 9 is an okay result. So how to buy and sell things, how to deal with inflation, if that's going to be an important thing in your game. If you're bringing tons of money into a society, maybe you want to track that. Maybe you don't. But if you do, you got some simple rules for it. Creating institutions. What if you're pouring money into a business that you want to slowly grow over time? You got some rules for that. For example, different types of institutions like druggists, hotels, geographical society, and it tells you what happens as you level up these different groups that you are funding. It allows people to really dig into the setting and become invested in a way that a lot of RPGs just kind of gloss over. How to deal with people. Again, some nice short little rules. Hiring retainers. Dealing with persuasion, reputation, resentment that might build up in the town as you do more and more nefarious deeds nearby. If you cause enough trouble, people are going to start hating you. And we've got a section on magic. It's basically Vancian magic, although it offers a variety of different other ways that you can deal with this. Similar to the rest of the book. The book, by and large, doesn't have just one way to do something. It is perfectly content to give you a variety of ways so that you can figure out the way that you enjoy most. Like I said, it has that toolkit feel to it. So you can read a magical formula. You can simply memorize things. You can do spells as rituals, which are safer. You just have a lot of options. You can create potions. You can use magic items. And you do have to try and control a spell when you cast it. And there are miscast tables, if you like that sort of thing. Magic of the gods. So you have some clerical magic. And we have a good variety of spell descriptions here. Though, as I mentioned, the spells are hugely fleshed out in another supplement. So we have at least, I think, around 100 spells that come with the game. And they're all very terse and easy to read. You got your duration, range, effect, school, and so on. They don't go on and try and cover every detail. They give you enough information that the game master can easily make rulings on how it would work. Raiding the Nightmare Realms. Here's where we get to the interesting part. You're going to be invading realms made out of nightmare. So these are psychological themed dungeons, which may have more than one level. The rules for Dungeoneering are similar to most OSR stuff. It's very clearly spelled out and easy to understand. The dungeons definitely have a more nightmarish feel, this being the theme of the game. And one of your main objectives in Dungeoneering is to recover something called the anchor. So there is some sort of object hidden in these dungeons that are keeping it anchored to the real world. And it's always easy to discover it. Once you see the anchor, you know that it's the anchor. but that provides an objective for invading these dungeons. You need to find this one object and escape safely with it. Once you do that, this dungeon will be disconnected from the normal waking world and will drift away back into the realms of nightmares. Your rules for combat. Nothing too surprising if you are used to typical D&D combat. Although you have rules that you can use for maneuvers, weapon length, and so on. Like most stuff, it's highly modular. Moving ahead a little bit. Nightmare's curses. If you're invading these nightmare realms, you're going to be subject to the corruption of the nightmare world. So, like you would expect, we have a random table of different horrible things that can happen to your character and can disfigure them, break them down over time until they get to the point where maybe they shouldn't be dungeoneering anymore. We have rules for travel, because you are expected to be exploring across the wilderness, looking for different types of nightmare realms to invade and to steal the money from. And we have a section on the GM's job. What I really like about this is it goes in depth into how to build dungeons, how to theme them, how to populate them, how to make them interesting and create different levels of danger and so on. It doesn't hand wave it. It doesn't just give you the bare bones. It really helps you out here. How to create a nightmare incursion. You need the crown. The crown is the main threat of the dungeon. You can think of it as the boss if it's a monster-themed dungeon. It's the main thing that is causing problems for people. So up in the world above, the crown is what people have noticed. So you could have things like death trap dungeons, heretic temples, monster hordes, spawning pits. The anchor, of course, is the object that is keeping the nightmare world there that you need to retrieve. Variety of additional threats. Johnstone is, of course, excellent at creating random tables. He's created some of the most complete toolkits out there for OSR type material. So, as you would expect, you got ways to create different types of threats. The maps of the dungeons are really well done in that you have the Kingdom of Dreams and then you can have these layers going down. But of course, they don't just have to be in a straight line. They can branch, they can fork, they can reconnect again. So you can create multiple levels of these nightmares. Things get a lot more dangerous the deeper you go, of course, and it becomes harder and harder to fulfill tasks. A lot of challenges just become more difficult. Random tables for creating wilderness themes, creating nightmares. And he recommends theming the different nightmare incursions or dungeons on different types of emotions, which I think is really smart. That gives you a theme that you can build off of. So, for example, if you wanted to base it on anxiety, fear, and paranoia, it has some ideas. What makes you want to run away? What makes your skin crawl? How are the monsters here like that? Everything should revolve around that theme. Different types of nightmare fuel. When a PC dies inside a nightmare incursion, if you do not know enough about their fears and past experiences, ask one or more of the following questions. Right? So who are you leaving behind? Who do you blame for this untimely end? And so on. Take the answers they give you and create new nightmare creatures and incursions from them. So the players dying and will leave their mark on the world, and the world will become more corrupted and more nightmarish. That's really cool. Different types of special abilities that you can give monsters. Some flaws and weaknesses you can give them. Running an incursion. As I mentioned, just lots of great details. Lots of great concrete advice. Skipping ahead a little bit, we have a bestiary. And unlike a lot of OSR books, this is a fairly complete bestiary. A lot of stuff like Lamentations of the Flame Princess really encourages you to create your own monsters to make them unique. However, this book goes the extra mile and gives you a lot of solid material that you can run. It's a lot less super weird than the stuff you would see in Lamentations books. It's much more easy to understand and run. But there's a good variety in here as well. You have things like Beastmen, the Cave Murdered, Changelings, Crab Dogs. So we have the right amount of weirdness and nightmarishness while making it still, like any OSR monster, easy to modify, easy to hack, easy to create your own. Skipping ahead past our monsters here. Have I mentioned how much I like the art in this book? It's really good. We have a number of optional rules at the back because this book is nothing if it isn't a toolkit. It just gives you more stuff. You feel like changing things up, here's how to change things up. Want to do troop style play? You got some rules for it. Some extra classes. How about a berserker and a disciple? Fey Knights, if you were a changeling type creature, or if you are a halfling. We got lots of random tables for creating more details about NPCs. We have randomizing stuff for monsters and for people to create lots of different types of professions here. Different types of settlements. And basically all of the random tables that you would need to flesh things out if you ran out of ideas. That's basically it. It's a really complete book. If you're getting into the OSR and you want just like a solid rule set that has lots of spells, lots of monsters, a good variety of rules covering pretty much every type of situation. It has a rationale for why the nightmare incursions are there. It has lots of really great art. It's a great all-in-one starter kit, so to speak, for starting to play these types of dungeoneering OSR type adventures. As usual, if this looks something that you would be interested in, I will put a link down in the description below where you can check it out for yourself. The hardcover version that I have here is, I believe, available from Lulu, but it also has PDF versions that are available from DriveThruRPG. Now, join me next time when I'm going to be taking a look at the supplement for the nightmares underneath. So this one is called the Nameless Grimoire, and it is just about magic. It is 400 pages of magic. New classes, new spells, new special abilities, new rules. And from what I have looked through so far, flipping through it, it looks like it would be extremely useful for pretty much any game that was more or less OSR and needed more magical stuff. So excited to look at that next time. And before I go today, a special thanks should go out to all of my patrons on Patreon, especially Michael Spellcasey, as I believe how you pronounce his name, Spellcasey perhaps, who just became a questing knight, which is joining my Patreon at the highest level, supporting the channel and keeping it going. Thanks so much, Michael. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you guys next time.